Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we have a very special guest who most people probably in the United States have heard very little about. What I can tell you about, though, is she is a best-selling author, in fact, number 7 in Europe, and that's even ahead of John Grisham. And if most of you know who John Grisham is, you've enjoyed a lot of his novels as well as them transferring into movies here in the United States. She's also the number 1 bestseller in France, Spain, Italy, and all of Scandinavia. In fact, in her home country of Sweden, 3.5 million copies alone in a country of 9 million have been sold. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today the author of a new book that is making its debut here in the United States, The Ice Princess, our guest, Camilla Lackberg. Camilla, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I took a look at, the press release, and I'm getting ready to start diving into this novel, as I don't usually read mysteries, not since Sidney Sheldon anyway. And I was really impressed with the fact that here you're going along about one career. You simply take a class in creative writing, and that just kind of changed things for you. What happened there?
Well, I've had this dream of becoming a writer ever since I was a very small child, but to me that was kind of like a rock star dream. It was something that I never thought I would be able to do, but that writing course just changed everything for me, and I actually started writing The Ice Princess during that course.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did you feel that you couldn't be a writer, if that was something that was inside of you?
Well, to me, authors, writers, they were just gods. They were up there, and I thought it was all about divine inspiration and all of those things that I now know isn't true. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't think I had it in me.
Mm-hmm. So what happened in the course that really changed, that made you think, I can do this?
I think the most important thing was that it actually made me realize that it's something that it's a craft, it's a job, it's something you can actually put a lot of hard work into and do. It's not about divine inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you get a lot of questions as you actually now have sort of a course, if you will, for people who aspire to be writers. And a lot of times when they have an opportunity to have your audience, they tend to think, maybe she's got a secret here that she could share with me that'll bust me out of the mundane cycle of just piling up papers full of words and not selling anything.
Exactly.
Tell us about that.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who dream about writing, or they dream about doing something totally different than what they do in their everyday life. And I think and I hope I'm an inspiration to those people, because I used to be an economist. I was probably Sweden's most unhappy economist, maybe even Europe's most unhappy.
Try being in the United States as an economist.
Yeah. I mean, I was just miserable, but I did manage to totally change my life, and I'm so much more happy with what I do, and I think everybody can do that. Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go ahead and talk about The Ice Princess. Now, the beauty that I love when I've had opportunities to read mysteries, murder mysteries, whatever category you want to put them into, for instance, one of my favorite authors was always Michael Crichton, because he had this unique way of presenting something that could seem very real, and I think that's where authors such as yourself deserve a lot of applause, because there is so much where you think, that seems like it's something that can happen. So tell us about how you go about putting something like this together.
Actually, for me, it's all about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Telling a story is all about the characters, and I don't, the whole book isn't seen through the eyes of one character. I change them frequently, even though I have my hero and heroine. Mm-hmm. But I just tell the story from different people's viewpoints, and to me, that's what a story is about.
So how do you go about getting their personalities and characters? Are these people that you study, or they're people that you know? That's sometimes the intriguing thing.
Well, I think as an author, you have to be very curious about people. And when I go to a party, when I leave the party, let me tell you, I know everything about everybody in there, because I'm like going around interrogating people. Mm-hmm. And it's just because I'm curious, and I think that people's lives are very exciting. I mean, I'm not just interested in you if you're the president or an astronaut or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people, if you start scratching the surface, they usually have really good stories to tell, and I put that into my book. So I do use a lot of stories from people around me, or people I meet, or people I hear about, and I put that all into the mix.
Mm-hmm. I know you say something that's right on the money. Is I've been broadcasting radio for more than 10 years, and people say, well, who have you interviewed? And then I start rattling off names, and they're like, really? You sat face-to-face with that person or this person? And I'm like, yeah, but I got to tell you, and this is in all true honesty, most of the people that to me I was starstruck would be people most people have never even heard of.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, there's an interesting thing about the common person that they tend to be a lot more talented and exuberant than the people that we tend to be starstruck by.
Yes, and even like the everyday dramas that all people go through. It's like I love to hear and ask people how they met, their husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend, because usually people, they have lovely stories or exciting stories or dramatic stories. And that is such an important, time in our life. And I would give that as advice. Start asking people about that, because you'll get the most lovely stories out of them.
Oh, you're not kidding. I mean, I'd be surprised. There was a time that I was a bartender, and I didn't just have to sit and listen to basically drunks, whining about how poor their lives are, even though you can see why that's happening. But once in a while, somebody would drift in, and you'd start asking just basic questions, and pretty soon you're like, he was a rocket scientist at Cape Canaveral.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy just off the street. And it just amazes you just how much is really going on around you if you just wake up.
And taxi drivers, they're
Boy, do they have
wonderful
stories.
Source of information.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
so you really draw a lot of your resources from many different things, then, don't you?
I do, and I've always had. I was a very morbid child. I'll put it right out there. I was a very morbid child, and I've always been morbid and had a great interest in the dark sides of humans. So I also always, I've always read a lot about murder investigations, about profiling, forensic medicine, things like that, just out of interest. And that, of course, helps me in my line of work.
Certainly does. Now, let's talk about what the story of the Ice Princess is about, because this, as I understand, is an American debut of a Swedish crime-writing sensation, as it says here in the Free Press News. And that's the other interesting thing, is why your work is just now emerging into the United States, but yet you've been big in places like Europe and even your home country.
I think we've been holding back a little bit with the U.S. market, because the U.S. market has been notoriously difficult for Scandinavian writers. So, we've kind of waited for the right opportunity, and after the Stieg Larsson books, I mean, the door has been kicked open, and there's so much more interest. So that was a much better time for me to release my first book here. But even though I'm on my 8th book soon in Sweden.
Oh, okay. So the Ice Princess is about?
It's about, my main heroine that I introduced in that book, Erica. She's a writer. She comes back to her hometown, Fjällbacka, which also happens to be my hometown. And she's there to write a book and to take care of the estate of her parents that just died. And she just happens to stumble upon the body of one of her closest childhood friends, Alexandra. And the body is in a bathtub in a house that is, it's really cold, and she's lying in a bathtub with water and ice covering the water. So just her knees and her upper torso is sticking out of it. Very, very, very. The book actually started with that picture in my head, so that's why it's so important for me. And then Erica, of course, has to try to find out who killed her childhood friend.
Oh, wow.
And she will fall in love along the way also.
Well, you've got to have romance to break the tension now, don't you?
Of course.
Somebody to believe it as well.
Yeah, it's all about contrasts.
Uh-huh. Fantastic. Now, I also understand that in the story that there's sort of a dark secret that's being held, and as we've been doing this program, it seems anybody who's holding on to a secret, that can literally kill the soul if you don't do something about it.
That's kind of the theme in the book, because I try to explore what happens to people when you have to keep a secret for very, very long. And you might keep the secret out of good reasons, but eventually it will turn into bad things. So that is a little bit the theme of the book, along with the fact that it's set in a small town, and it's very important what people think of you, what the neighbor thinks of you. So that is also a strong theme, to keep up appearances. That becomes so important that you'll do anything to keep up appearances.
Ah. Now, also in the story here, there's the couple, it's Patrick and Erica, as I understand.
Yeah.
And it seems that they're planning, or one of them was planning to write a book while suffering from writer's block. What does writer's block feel like, if you've ever had that experience?
I've actually never had writer's block. I could have it for a couple of hours or a day or two, but then I just, kind of let the book go for a couple of hours or for that day and start fresh again the next day. So I've never had this experience of not being able to write for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. But it must be awful.
I'm sure it is. I keep remembering a funny little film. It was called Crazy People, starring Dudley Moore. And all his job was to write advertising copy,
Yeah.
And so he was telling, his boss, because he was into a writer's block of advertising copy of all things. And he says, I'm just having a writer's block, and your boss says, no, that's from people who write, novels that are 1,000 pages long that are complicated. You just write ads. But what was funny about how the movie turns out is he sends them basically to a mental institution for just kind of a little vacation, figures he's having a nervous breakdown. And he takes all these people that could be considered crazies and he starts having them write ads. And it turns out that these guys are writing ads that are just killing everybody. They were just really ridiculous. But it's kind of funny how you can drift into an arena that you just never even thought was possible within you. Now, as I understand here, you're on basically an 11-city tour that ends on April 8th in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Now, as you're out there and you're talking with people, I'm sure you tend to see a lot of inspiration in people's eyes, like, she was doing this one thing, and now all of a sudden it's this. That's got to be pretty magnificent.
People do tend to love that part of the story, and I also think it's also the fact that I'm a woman, I have small children, and still I've been able to fulfill my dreams. I think that's an inspiration also, which is very, very important. I love to show other women that you don't have to give up everything, even though you're having kids. Mm-hmm. You can do both.
Well, I agree, as I've interviewed many female authors that were the same way. In fact, one came in with a novel that was set in France, when it was actually sort of a story about her where she just ran from the United States, went to France, and started growing up there more or less on her own. But she came in and she had basically a 3-month-old baby sitting in the studio with her. And I thought, now, see, there's a person that's committed. She's on a book tour, got her baby hanging out with her at 6 o'clock in the morning. Anything's possible if you just prioritize.
Yeah, I've had my baby along, my third child. He's been tagging along for book fairs, and he's been in the Baby Bjorn while I've done readings, and everything's possible.
Absolutely. Now, why don't you share, if you can, being a mother, and you've got 3 children, how you sort of set your priorities in your time, because as you know, young kids, they need your time. It's when they become teenagers, they just need your pocketbook. But, how you go about doing that to set those boundaries so that you can be moving in the direction of your goals and dreams.
Well, I try to treat this as an office job. So I work at the office when the kids are in preschool and in school. So that's the hours I have. But when I pick them up from school, then I don't, sit by the computer. Then I'm totally focused on them. And, the difficult thing, and that works great. So the more difficult things is when I have to go on tour, but then you have to have a really good support system. And my husband is great. He's a very modern Swedish man that actively helps out with both household and babies and everything around that. And we've got Grandma. She's great. She's with the baby now. She feeds him too much candy, but that's a price we have to pay.
Yeah. No candy for you growing up, but I'm going to give it to your kids.
No. I didn't get any candy like 9 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly. That's what I mean. No candy for you growing up, but the little kid gets it all day long.
Exactly. So we've got a great support system, and that helps out, of course.
Now, you started your book tour here on March 28th in New York, and, I mean, look, you're bouncing from the East Coast to the West Coast. I mean, just back and forth, it seems, but it looks like they kind of left you here on the West Coast for a while. What's that been like in the different cities for you? Had you ever been to these particular cities before?
I've been to New York a couple of times. My husband and I love New York, so we try to go there as often as we can. And I've actually also spent 2 summers in Denver when I was a teenager. So that was really neat to be able to come back there and say hi to my relatives there as well, my family. But most of the other cities are totally new to me, and I'm just in awe. I think this is great.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine that once you kind of let Denver and Phoenix settle into you, which is an interesting contrast this time of year, that you probably have a whole new set of conspiracies that you're about to put together for a new novel, aren't you?
I'm getting my material wherever I can. So you never know. I might be killing some American tourists in the next book.
He was skiing down a slope with a mysterious briefcase.
Yeah, you should always be nice to a crime writer, or you'll end up as a murderer or victim in the next book. Take notice of that. Good advice.
Exactly. Now, what is, if there is any, a difference between, say, your culture of Sweden as far as when you write and what the story is compared to what we tend to experience from American writers, if there is, in fact, a difference?
I do think there's a difference, and I mean, I read a lot of your, for example, American crime fiction as well. I love Michael Connelly, for example, but they are a bit different. I tend to think that the American ones are more action-oriented, where the Scandinavian English ones are a little bit more old school. They're a bit slower in their pace of telling the story, a bit more, more characters, and so I do think there are differences.
Well, and, as I was reading through some of the reviews, there was a point where one of the reviewers, this book kind of moves along slowly at certain points, and I'm thinking, but that's where you got to kind of flip the switch and understand what another culture is like. You're getting a real window into how they are. And in Sweden, and I know I've been to Europe as well, they really can take their time over there. France especially, my goodness, you talk about a country that doesn't wake up until afternoon, and I'm like, this is where I need to be living.
Yeah, we do things at a slower pace, and we're not that much in a hurry, and we're not that MTV influenced with, everything moving in a really high speed. But I think so. I think that tends to influence our writing, and some people like it and some people don't. But most people, I do think, tend to find it quite relaxing with a little bit of more slow pace.
Especially when you consider the people who are trying to work on solving the crime. The detectives, for instance, and one comes to mind. We've had the pleasure to have him on our program, and that was Peter Falk, who played Columbo.
Yeah.
And he was just like this dog with a Frisbee that just would never let it go, but eventually he wore the people down to confess. Now, that's detective work.
Yeah, it is. I love Columbo, by the way.
Great guy. Now, in Europe, you have been very well received. And, I mean, when you put yourself, up against John Grisham, that's pretty big. So what do you think is the difference that you're kind of taking off like a rocket and he's somewhere behind you?
Well, I'm quite competitive, and the problem was that when the first, the list the year before that, I was in the 6th place, and I was first so ecstatic when I didn't see any other female names before me, so I was like, yay, I'm number 1 female in Europe. And then I saw Stephanie Meyer someplace number 2.
Uh-oh.
So that really bugged me. So I decided that, no, she writes youth books. So I kind of edited her out of the list in my own head.
Youth books, okay.
Yeah, I'm very competitive.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, what are your plans here now? Is this going to be part of a series here?
It's a part of a series. So in Sweden, it's already 8 books in the series, and it's with the same main characters and the same policemen. So hopefully the people in America will want to see what happens with my main characters as well through the books as they progress.
Anybody who's ever been a Clive Cussler fan, who's out of Oregon himself, has done just the same thing, kind of written his own 007, and it works very, very well, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. It's been a real pleasure, Camilla, to have you on the program. Is there a website people can go and find out more about you and where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, and I've got an English blog as well, and it's at www.camillalackberg.com, and Lackberg is spelled L-A-C-K Berg, so camillalackberg.com.
And also, I just wanted to let you know that one of the reasons that we love having guests like you on the program is obviously people who are approaching midlife and beyond are really beginning to stir in their dreams and thinking, time is now sort of on the other side of the mirror, and maybe I should start taking action to realize these things, that I've always wanted to do. And you've pretty much hit your dream and took it running while you would be younger than a lot of these people. What would you like to say to that audience that's listening to you about that motivation?
Well, they can borrow some of my motivation, because my motivation was that I didn't want to die without having at least tried. Mm-hmm. That was the main, because I was very, very afraid of trying out my dream and failing. But I had it in the back of my mind the whole time that I can't die without having at least tried and make a good effort.
So agree with you. That's why we continue to try to inspire this crowd. Move forward and show up. You'll be surprised what's really going to happen.
You create your own luck. I firmly believe in that. You create your own luck through hard work.
I agree. Camilla Lackberg, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Hope we can have you back again.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Take care.
Thank you.
Again,
Bye.
the book is The Ice Princess. Our guest today, Camilla Lackberg. Get a chance if you like mysteries. This seems like a big one. I'm Daniel Davis. We want to thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Also be sure to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com, the number 550, and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. We thank you again for tuning in. This is Beyond 50, and remember, live your day past halfway.